Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this hour. A lot of interesting information and news to go over today. My talking points this morning is directly related to the lawsuit which has been filed to prohibit the Department of Revenue, the Missouri Department of Revenue, from instituting RealID in direct violation of a Missouri statute which barred and prohibited the state from instituting any aspect of RealID as it was passed by the federal government in 2005. Peter Kinder, recently, he's the lieutenant governor, for those of you who are not familiar, and an attorney in Stoddard County filed a lawsuit on behalf of an individual who attempted to go down into Stoddard County and renew his driver's license. Apparently, in violation of the Missouri statute and in their attempt to follow RealID, which is a horrific piece of legislation passed in 2005, Eric Griffin, 52-year-old man, went to the Department of Motor Vehicles after passing the application process to obtain a concealed carry permit. The way that these Missouri Department of Revenue driver's license facilities are operating is that they are scanning in your personal documents. Now, the law says that they cannot hold or retain any personally identifiable information. That's what the Missouri law says. The RealID Act demands that not only do you appear once, but every renewal you must bring all of your documentation with you, including your birth certificate, Social Security card, other identifying information to verify that you are in fact that person who you're appealing or applying to be. If this isn't Big Brother in 1984 exposed, I don't know what is. He refused to allow them to scan his documentation, and as a result, they sent him away without renewing his driver's license. The information that's collected is sent and forwarded to a company by the name of Morpho Trust USA, a company based in Georgia. Now, those of you who follow our show routinely know that we've had a number of guests on here, including Bob Parker and Mike Moon and Doreen Hannes, and we've talked about these issues and how Morpho Trust is the company that is a public-private partnership. And Morpho Trust is the company that is used by the federal government to develop this information and build these databases, which they then, according to the RealID Act, share not only with the federal government, but with international governments as well. Under RealID, your identification, a de facto national ID card, parading around or masked around the idea of a state driver's license, will act as a international, the equivalent basically of a passport. So if you were to need, as an example, to go down to the Cayman Islands or the Bahamas, or if you wanted to go to Mexico or Canada, essentially you would only need your driver's license to appear. You won't need a passport anymore, because when you show up at the customs office for whatever country you're entering, your identification will include a chip which will actually have and contain all of the data about you. Now, Missouri passed a legislation back in 2009 that says, stop right there. We're not going to allow you to capture information about all of our residents and share it with an international and a national database. So essentially, what this comes down to is the state government of Missouri is in direct violation of the law. And what's even more disturbing is that they say they're not. Now, there was a restraining order that was just signed yesterday afternoon by a judge to bar these the state of Missouri and the Department of Revenue from capturing this information. Ted Farnan, who is the Department of Revenue Communications Director, stated that we can't comment on litigation. The department's operations are not inconsistent with the statutory protocol. If ever you heard political doublespeak, that would be it. I spoke directly to a member of the Department of Revenue in reference to this issue, and in fact was referred to Ted Farnan's office, who sent me an email back but refused to come on the show and talk about it. That's not surprising, because essentially the state of Missouri is acting as an agent on behalf of the federal government to steal your identity and provide it to a third party. This temporary restraining order says that plaintiff and all the citizens of the state of Missouri are vested with the protections afforded them under Chapter 32, 302, and 571 RSMO concerning the collection by defendant in the Department of Revenue and any dissemination to any third party or entity of information contained in their application for concealed carry endorsement or any individual status as a concealed carry endorsement holder. My concern, of course, is that my first initial blush on this was that it only referenced that relating to concealed carry holders, which, of course, is important information that we want to bar the federal government from having, because it's a de facto registration. However, interestingly and thankfully, this order states, and this is the order from the judge, collecting and retaining the birth certificate, residency documents, application, or any information thereon of plaintiff Eric Griffin for a concealed carry endorsement under Chapter 571 RSMO is prohibited, and they are restrained and enjoined from the following actions: disseminating to any entity or officer of the federal government the application or any information thereon on plaintiff Eric Griffin, disseminating to any entity or officer of the federal government the application or any information thereon of any Stoddard County resident for a concealed carry endorsement, collecting and retaining the birth certificate, residency requirements, application, or any information thereon from concealed carry endorsement under 571, approved by the county sheriff, blah, 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 blah. Now, this is set for a hearing on March 12th. And those of you who recall, we had a rather lengthy show on a Saturday morning where we had Bob Parker and Mike Moon come in, and they discussed rather at length the violations that the state of Missouri has been instituting in relation to this. Dana Loesch, a radio host up in St. Louis, broke this story with an interview with Kinder, and of course they held a press conference so that they could all pat themselves on the back, and apparently the order was submitted directly thereafter from the judge. Now we're going to have to see what comes out of this court case on the 12th, and I suspect that it may be some time before we see a final resolution. What I can tell you is this: if you go down to a motor vehicle department and attempt to have your driver's license renewed, and they want to scan your information in, I strongly encourage you to get to our site at americasvoicenow.org or facebook.com/americasvoicenow, and make sure that you are, and I apologize, it's Mike Jones, not Mike Moon, by the way, who we had here on Saturday. I encourage you to make sure that you bring a copy of this document with you and demand that they not capture and retain your information as well. It's an absolute violation of state law, and it's a violation of federal law, and frankly, it's extra-constitutional in its nature. And you all know how I feel about that. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We'll be back in just a moment.
The area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, your Class 3 dealer for automatic weapons and suppressors, including Gemtech and Huntertown, with a great selection of holsters, slings, magazines, and gun storage options. West Plains Pawn and Jewelry will also do special orders. With new arrivals every week, the area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, 1713 West U.S. Highway 160, or shop online at westplainspawn.com.
Another year older, another birthday blood. Not when you're listening to the Birthday Club here on 107.1 The Point each morning during the morning show. Proudly presented by Ryan's Family Restaurant. Call in your loved ones, your mom, dad, grandma, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, nieces, whoever, for their chance to be the winner of a great buffet and drink from Ryan's Family Restaurant. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you from 107.1 The Point and Ryan's Family Restaurant.
All right, we have returned. Thursday, we're going to have with us the candidate for the Constitution Party. I'll give you more information about that a little bit later. And on the 20th, Jason Smith, the Republican candidate, will be meeting with us as well to talk a little bit about where these individuals stand on the issues surrounding the candidacy for the 8th District in Missouri. This morning, and I'll be more than happy to take your calls on our Wits End Classic hotline. You can call us at 257-1111 or 866-554-6636 to discuss this issue. I had a lot of news information that I wanted to throw out this morning, but and we can certainly touch on that this morning as we go forward. But I think it's important that we get your insight and input into the issues surrounding this. Bob Parker and Mike Jones, who we had on the show on a Saturday afternoon, we went through an extensive review of exactly what the Department of Revenue is doing by instituting money that they obtained through a federal grant to update all the equipment in these motor vehicle offices where they renew your driver's licenses. Now, it's interesting in the sense that, you know, the RealID Act requires all kinds of biometric information, including facial recognition scanning. It can cover everything from fingerprints and palm prints and basically veins on the back of your hand, retinal scans. I mean, the list is endless. And what we're building here, ladies and gentlemen, is a national database on every American who has a driver's license. And they're using the concept of a state license to accomplish that end. Now, in a state like Missouri, and there's a number of other states, I believe it's 11, that have passed RealID prohibition, basically what's happening, and by the way, for those of you who aren't aware, let me make something very clear to you. The legislation that passed in 2009 is a perfect example of a state nullifying extra-constitutional overreach by the federal government. So for those of you who believe that nullification doesn't work, let me point this example out to you. Essentially, when you nullify a federal regulation, you say that even though the federal government may have passed this, and even though for all intents and purposes the courts may uphold it, we in the state of Missouri believe that this is extra-constitutional in its nature, and that it violates the rights of the citizens of Missouri in some way, shape, or form. In this case, the Fourth Amendment against unreasonable search and seizure, building a database, violating your Second Amendment rights to own and possess a firearm, and a host of others. It also violates 10th Amendment states' sovereignty and independence. And so nullification is a process whereby states say, we don't really care what you say in the federal government. We're not going to abide by or administer that particular regulation. Now, there are those out there who scream bloody murder every time you raise the word nullification. Let me tell you something. It's been around since well before 1798, when Jefferson embodied it in a document, and Virginia, the state of Virginia, embodied it in a number of documents against the Alien and Sedition Act, which basically you could get thrown in jail for writing something negative about the president and the Congress and the vice president. And the Alien and Sedition Act, of course, was later repealed as a violation of your First Amendment rights to have free speech. However, many states instituted nullification. And the concept of nullification, if you're not aware of it, I want you to do yourself a favor. I'm going to give you a website. I happen to be reading Tom Woods' book right now. Tom Woods is probably one of the foremost experts on nullification. And his book is so informative and so educational, and thank you so much to the listener who provided it to me to read, that I actually am going to contact Mr. Woods. I'm in the process of. In fact, I've already made the initial contact to his organization. And what I'm going to look for them to do is come before our House and our Senate and offer a one-day seminar. We're going to have to pay him to come here. And the seminar will be no cost to the senators and the representatives who want to attend it. The premise behind that being to educate them on the real true principles, ideas, foundational concepts of nullification, and how we can use it and employ it here to essentially do what the Restore Missouri project is all about. Build a firewall around our state that bars and prohibits the federal government from reaching inside of our state walls and trampling upon our rights. Now, the idea of having Woods come do this is basically the idea behind it is that Tom is probably the foremost most well-respected professor of this. The guy's got a bachelor's from Harvard, and then he's got a PhD and a political philosophy doctorate from the University of Virginia. So he's no slouch. And he's published 11 books. He's a New York Times best-selling author and so forth and so on. The object and the idea behind this is to essentially make sure that our House representatives and our state senators understand, one, that they have a constitutional obligation, because they've taken an oath, to protect us from both federal and, I might add, state overreach. This Department of Revenue violation being a perfect example of nullification of a state statute or a state law which also violates our constitutional rights. Nullification isn't limited only to the federal government. In fact, we as individuals effectively nullify when we do what? Commit civil disobedience. And that is the premise under which I tell you, and I've said repeatedly, that in states that have passed these firearms bans, like New York and Maryland, that you simply refuse to comply. You state emphatically, I will not comply with this order. It is civil disobedience. It is the Rosa Parks method of standing up for your own individual rights. Now, I'd love to hear back from some of you, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of email about this idea about Tom Woods. But what I'd really like to hear is how many of you will be willing to support me in this effort. We're going to have to pay for Woods to come out here. We're going to have to pay for him to stay out here and do a one-day seminar up there. Now, he recently spoke at the Consent of the Governed event that occurred in the House, or up in Jefferson City. And the issue of consent of the governed is important. But what I want this seminar to focus on and specialize on is instructing and educating and informing and motivating and activating our legislators, whether they be representatives or senators, to actually understand the principles of how they can utilize their power, their authority, their representative power that we have delegated to them to do what needs to be done to stand in the way of the federal government on things like Obamacare, on things like federal legislation on gun laws, on things like the importance of anti-drone legislation, which we're beginning to see flooding our airways and our skies. Now, if you're not aware, by the way, yesterday a drone was noticed over JFK Airport flying at 1,800 feet, and the FAA has no idea whose drone it was. I mean, come on, folks. They're starting an investigation. This was picked up by an air traffic controller out of a booth who recognized that there was something desperately wrong. There was a drone flying at 1,800 feet in the middle of their airspace at an airport, an international airport, I might add. So just the idea of how and where and under what circumstances nullification can be employed to educate and inform and motivate and activate our local representatives and our state senator representatives to make sure that they're doing, one, that they understand what power they hold. Two, that they understand how to wield the sword that they have been given. And three, that they begin to employ that accurately and with all appropriate action towards getting through the chink in federal armor and showing other states leading the way in the nullification of federal overreach. Let me tell you something. The Constitution is just a piece of paper. It cannot enforce itself. We need our representatives to do that for us. Otherwise, they're just another cog in the mass machine. Go ahead, caller. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, Mike, you, of course, know I agree with you on this subject.
Yes, sir.
But there'll be a lot of people, and they bring some pretty good arguments, that the little thing called the Civil War settled this argument quite nicely, especially as concerning the Fed's supremacy to the state.
Right.
Remember, I agree. My contention is that what we're seeing now has been suppressed basically by that event until recently. That we should have been fighting some of this stuff.
We should have been using nullification all along. Yes. And the argument that the Civil War resolved that issue is not even remotely accurate. And I can tell you why. One, just because the Civil War, and the Civil War was actually fought not necessarily over what we've always been taught, which was slavery and all the rest of that, but it was fought over states' rights. And because the Civil War came to an end, does not mean that the states' rights were basically adulterated and diluted and removed. They haven't been abdicated. The Constitution very clearly and expressly states that the states have the right to run and operate their own government. For all intents and purposes, we're no more than 50 separate little nations who agree, for the basis of operating within a societal infrastructure that makes a difference, that we have delegated to a federal government, a central government, a national government, a very small and limited and enumerated express authority to operate in certain areas that benefit all of us as a whole, i.e. treaties and the formulation of money and, a centralized money system that basically is the same whether you're in Massachusetts or whether you're in Miami or whether you're in Maricopa, Arizona. So the idea being that we have given our federal government a very, very limited opportunity to operate on our behalf. What we do know is that they have vastly exceeded that authority in extra-constitutional fashions, and what we need to do is make sure that our representatives are fully informed. Then they can take that knowledge and know that they've got that information in their kit bag, if you will, that they can pull it out and use it where it's necessary. And I believe that if they were given the tools and the skills, look, you don't show up to do a plumbing job without a wrench, without a pair of pliers, without screwdrivers, without a drill, without the basic necessities and the tools for the job. And I truly believe, and I truly believe that our representatives, including our senators, are basically sitting there asked to complete a job, and they've only been given a smattering of tools, none of which are specialized for the job which they have at hand. Now imagine a plumber who had a pipe wrench, and suddenly it dawned on him, hey, this thing has got 1,000 uses in what I do every day. Instead, we've given them a few screwdrivers and asked them to unscrew a 4-inch waistline. Well, you can't do that with screwdrivers, no matter how hard you try. However, give the guy a pipe wrench, and he understands exactly what to do. And I believe that nullification and the basic principles therein will vastly educate these guys and girls to the point where they have the wherewithal and the ability to make and take active roles in eliminating federal overreach. So we've got a break coming up. I appreciate your thoughts. If you want to stick through the break, we can do that. Folks, you're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Mike Evans. You can find us on the web.
Fox News Radio. I'm Chris Foster. They're waiting on 5 more cardinals at the Vatican of the 115 who will elect the next pope.
There is no desire to hasten this process.
Vatican spokesman Thomas Rosica.
Beginning this afternoon, the Sistine Chapel will be closed to tourists and pilgrims, and the work will begin to prepare the Sistine Chapel for the conclave.
Pope Benedict's replacements to be chosen through a series of votes until someone has a 2/3 majority. It's a snowy morning in Chicago. Hundreds of plows on the roads. Tim Gibbons owns some of them.
All our crews have been dispatched.
Some flights are canceled in Chicago and Minneapolis. Up to 10 inches of snow in the forecast today from the upper Midwest to the Ohio Valley, with that storm then moving east the next couple of days. The singer Justin Bieber apologizes and blames technical problems for a late show start in London, with a lot of young fans leaving early to go to bed or catching the last train home. Fox News, we report, you decide.
I'd like to thank our sponsor, Wits End Classic Barbershop, who is the sponsor of our telephone lines this morning. They're located on the square in West Plains. It's Wits End Classic Barbershop. Thanks to our friends over at West Plains Pawn and Gun. You can find them on the web at westplainspawn.com. They can be reached at 417-256-3000, and they're located on Route 160, about a mile past Walmart on the right-hand side. 400 guns undercover. Pizza Hut, our friends down there on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. They have an outstanding lunch menu with salad, pizza, and pasta. Excellent opportunity for you to have a great lunch and eat well and something tasty. Our friends over at the Battery Station at 303 Washington Avenue. You can find them on the web at batterystation.com. Telephone 417-257-7799. Our friends over at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance can be found on the web at ozarkmtnselfreliance.com. My friend Brian there can be reached at 870-492-4030. They're located a half mile east of Walmart at 3225 Route 62, Mountain Home. My friend Mary over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery, the best damn bakery in 100 miles. She's right off the square in West Plains at 2 Evans Arcade, and you can reach her at 255-2253. And my friend Bill Stone over at Stone Construction. If you're considering doing remodeling, custom or new construction, or anything like commercial, give Bill a call and have him bid on your project at 293-0116.
There is this product on Amazon that is simply going crazy. The banana slicer, almost 2,500 consumer reviews. I've been trying to come up with an ideal way to slice a banana. Use a knife, they say. Well, my parole officer won't let me around knives. Or how about this one? What can I say about the banana slicer that hasn't already been said about the wheel or penicillin? Obviously, just a pure hoax.
Saturdays noon to 3 and weekdays at 7:35 for your Digital Minute. It's Kim Commando on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
News Talk 107.1 The Point Weather sponsorships are available for your business marketing plans. Contact Cody or Josh at 255-2548 for more information.
From the Point Weather Center for this one, we'll have mostly cloudy skies with a couple of showers. Could be some rain and snow showers through the day. The high temperature near 40. A flurry this evening, clearing later tonight, low 26. Sunny tomorrow, high 46. Sunny skies Thursday, the high 50. I'm staff meteorologist Jim Rinaldi, and for more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
America's Voice Now, delivering truth over mainstream propaganda every single day. Hi, my name is Michael Evans, and I'm your host, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and Saturday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. Join me daily for important guests and my unique slant on hot topics in the news. Visit americasvoicenow.org for even more news, articles, and commentary, and watch our show streaming live to your PC. Share your morning with me. Get educated, informed, motivated, and activated. America's Voice Now, right here on 107.1. Now, I want all of you to remember to do exactly as that nice man told you in the last commercial. Glenn, are you there?
Yes, Mike.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't help putting in my own shameless plug.
Of the states concerning the federal, we're still seeing ramifications of the Civil War to this day. I mean, the Voting Rights Act that's in front of the Supreme Court right now is an example of that.
Right.
Basically, that stuff took place on account of repression in the South after the Civil War.
Right.
Now, that's still in place, and those people need to bear in mind that certain southern states' voting laws are controlled because of that issue, because of states' rights versus the federal to this day. And we're just now beginning to fight some of that out in the Supreme Court.
Well, I'll tell you something else. I'm going to give you another perfect example of how the government operates on its own level of reason and rationale. 8 former Drug Enforcement Administration chiefs are saying that the federal government needs to act now, or it might lose the chance to nullify Colorado and Washington laws legalizing recreational marijuana use. So here you've got the same people who swear up and down, oh my goodness, you can't say the word nullification. That's terrible. That's tantamount to treason. And yet, when it's in their best interest, they're more than happy to use it themselves.
Sure.
Nullification is a principle, folks, that operates, and by the way, the federal government doesn't have a right to nullify Colorado and Washington law. First of all, there's a 10th Amendment prohibition against doing exactly that, and these guys should all be charged with treason for even suggesting it. The simple truth is this: the only people who can nullify federal law or state law are the citizens themselves and their appropriate legislatures. That's it. The federal government can't nullify a damn thing, because the federal government is the entity by which the overreach is occurring. The drug laws in this country in and of themselves are an overreach of federal government. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the government can pass a law barring you from having recreational use or medicinal use of marijuana. And there's absolutely no excuse why we have allowed it to go on so far. But to take this thing and turn it on its head and say that the feds should nullify state pot laws is an absolute absurdity, and quite frankly, it's a bastardization of the entire concept of nullification. In fact, that may be one of the reasons why they're throwing the word out there. So, I mean, here's the idea. You can't have a federal government nullify a state law because, first of all, that would the supremacy clause would be the way that they would try to get around that, not nullification. You can't the master can't nullify what the slave does. The slave can only nullify the master. I mean, it's ridiculous to even use this. In fact, that just goes to show you how far out of touch these people really are. They don't even understand the principle of nullification, which is that the weaker member nullifies the stronger member in an attempt to balance the scales properly, again, the way that they were intended to be balanced. And the Voter Act is exactly what we're talking about that's being instituted down in the South. The federal government had no right to come down to those states, to the southern states, and say, we're going to implement these laws and force you to follow them until you prove to us that you're fair and balanced. I mean, what kind of crap is that? Those states should have turned around a long time ago and said, you can pass whatever law you want. We're going to run our state elections the way we see fit. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that is an example of proper state use of nullification. Unfortunately, what's happened is, rather than try to do it properly through the nullification process, they've turned around and thrown it up to the level of the Supreme Court, who has the opportunity. And because the Supreme Court is not some perfect arbiter of law, in fact, they're anything but, because they owe all of their allegiance, as I mentioned yesterday. They owe all of their allegiance because they are budgetarily monitored by the government, and because they are chosen and put into play as a Supreme Court justice by a president from the executive. They owe all their allegiance to the same entity by which they're supposed to find against. That doesn't happen. You can't expect them to sit there and rule accurately, and they are not the final arbiters of anything. They have no role in determining constitutional law. They only have a role in identifying what the issues are that may occur between states. But nowhere in there do they have the right to be the final arbiter of federal law. So, anyway, that's my spin on it. I'll give you the last word.
No, I will say that once upon a time there may have been a need for those acts to take place after the Civil War. It's doubtful. But we're seeing the ramifications, the effects of it to this day, and we will never be totally free from racism. The reasons these laws came to be down there, besides states' rights, And if we wait for it to come to a total end, they'll never go away.
Agreed.
Nullification needs to take place. The states need to have this belated pushback in order to achieve the equilibrium that needed to exist in the first place. The pushback taking place now is well and good and should have happened 50 years ago.
Well, and to take it one step further, just because a law has not, or just because the rights of someone have not been exercised before, does not eliminate those rights.
Sure.
So, I mean, you know,
it may atrophy, but it doesn't go away.
Exactly, they may atrophy, but you're exactly right. They may atrophy, but that doesn't mean that they are eliminated. And, you know, as a contractual aspect, if you want to look at it from that perspective, if you sign a contract with someone and that person is supposed to pay you, let's say, X dollars per month for something that you've provided for them, and they miss a payment, just because you don't immediately foreclose on them doesn't mean that your right to foreclose on them is forever barred. And that's the perfect example, because the Constitution is exactly that. It is a compact. It is an agreement. It is a contract. And it's a contract that the federal government has violated over and over and over for the last 200 and some odd years. So, hey, thank you for the call. I appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Wise
Bye-bye.
comments and wise reasoning from that gentleman. Go ahead, caller. Welcome to the show.
Morning, Mike.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to tell you I appreciate what you do, and I'm an avid listener. And
well, thank you.
Listen every day, but I have a question, and then I'd like for you to, I'll hang up and let you answer.
All right.
But, you know, these things that I've been hearing about the Homeland Security buying these light armored vehicles, 2,700 of them, 2 billion rounds of ammunition, and their own private army training. I've heard different places. I even heard the other day and tried to find it on the internet. They're supposedly training in Mexico, which is, you know, that's impossible.
They're not training in Mexico. They're training right in Fort Leonard Wood, and I've got the documentation to prove it.
Okay.
So, and in fact, I'm about to do a story about the fact that a document was just released about U.S. internment camps and how they are and how they're training and building up and what these camps entail. And they are intended directly for U.S. citizens, despite the Army's and the federal government's declarations that they are meant only for foreign countries. They reference constantly the Department of Homeland Security, which has no international function. But go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to ask, you know, that you never hear this on Hannity. You never hear it on Bill O'Reilly. You never hear it anywhere. They stay away from this. I've never heard it on any of their shows.
I hear you.
And I don't know if they're in on it or if they're been warned off on it, whatever. But if, you know, all of this talk they do, this certainly should be talked about.
If those guys would just simply raise the issue and allow the American people to understand what's truly happening, we would have a sea change in America, because what would happen is the millions upon millions upon millions of people who would find that information and then act upon it and demand resolution would overwhelm the federal and state government systems. We would have people demanding.
O'Reilly and put this in there and to see why he doesn't comment on it. Of course, I haven't heard anything, but
and you're probably not likely to. I can't speak for those gentlemen, and I appreciate your thoughts, and you know, I feel the same frustration, especially from this side of the mic, because I'm out here trying to dispel the smoke that the mainstream media has spread over all of America, like a beekeeper blows smoke over his bees to calm them down.
Yeah,
right. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I actually suspect I'm taking my life in my hand. I know I'm taking my freedom in my hands. Well, I might actually be taking my life in my hands talking about these things.
I think about that every time I listen to you, and I keep telling my wife, I said, you're going to turn on this station one of these days, and it's going to be nothing there. But,
you know, but why these guys won't do it is beyond my understanding, and certainly they don't address. You know, they don't even know I exist, and
well, there has to be a reason for it.
Well,
and that's what I was trying to get at.
Right.
Whether they're in on it or if they're just been warned off of it.
Well, you know what?
Been threatened. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I get it. Hey, listen. Thank you for the call. The most logical answer I can come up with for that particular question is this. The answer has been given to us many times. When you look at a problem, the most reasonable and simplest answer is usually the right one. I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to why these folks are not talking about what I'm talking about every single day. Why I have to be the one, a little small guy out in the middle of nowhere, a flea on the elephant's hiney, who has to be the guy to break the mainstream media's hold. I don't get it either. We'll be right back.
There's one man on this earth who really, truly gets it.
Health insurance today is not taxed. Obamacare taxes it. It doesn't tax you, it taxes the provider. The provider cannot swallow $100 billion in new taxes. But Obama and his law seek to conceal this from you. So already there's upward pressure on your policies because of all the freebies that are going to be handed out.
Weeknights from 5 till 8, Mark Levin on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
The area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry.
Online at westplainspawn.com.
Top of the line, new and used optics from Nikon, Leopold, Burris, Redfield, Zeiss, and Schmidt & Bender. Ask about their selection of binoculars, laser sights, and night vision goggles. With new arrivals every week, the area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, 1713 West U.S. Highway 160, or shop online at westplainspawn.com. Family Fun and Fitness, LLC presents rape and assault prevention classes at Country Cupboard in Licking, Missouri. Men, women, boys, and girls, if you want to know how to stack the deck in your favor in a situation where violence is the only answer, this class is for you. Rape and assault prevention classes are held Monday evenings at 5:30 beginning February 11th and run through March 18th. Class size is limited, so call today 417-260-1006 or register at Country Cupboard, 217 North Highway 63 in Licking.
The deals at U.S. Cellular's Unbelievable Sales event are so incredible, even guys who believe in aliens can't believe them.
Open your eyes, sheeple. They are among us.
But a free Motorola Electrify M when you buy one for $149.99?
Conspiracy theory.
U.S. Cellular's Unbelievable Sales event. Now through April 1st. U.S. Cellular. Hello, better. Certain restrictions apply. Applicable smartphone data plans required. New 2-year agreements and $30 activation fees may apply. See store for details.
All right, we're back. You know, it's interesting, guys. When you go to this Morpho Trust website, this is the agency that is collecting this information and disseminating it to third parties. It's Morpho as, let me spell that for you. M like Michael, O-R, P like Peter, H like Hotel, O, Trust. That's Morpho Trust. Like morph, like morphing into something. And its name is kind of indicative, actually. morphotrust.com. I encourage you to go there and in the search bar type in the word Missouri and see what you get. They even have fingerprint locations here in the state of Missouri for residents to fall in line with their requirements. And I'm going to tell you, this company, you know, if ever there was a company that, you've heard about that group out there called Anonymous who you know, hacks into systems and stuff. If ever there was a company that I'd like to see splashed across the news screen as being hacked into by Anonymous, this one would be the one. Could you imagine the outrage of the federal government if Anonymous went in there and took this and found all this data they're storing and blew it out all over the web? Because that would show that this whole thing is a sham. They're not interested in protecting your identity. They're interested in capturing it. And there's a vast difference between capture and protection. Go ahead, caller. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Mike. Rich from Branson.
Hey, Rich.
That last caller, I kind of feel likewise, but I'm going to tell you something. There was a talk show host back east that I used to listen to that always had guests on that researched IRS and the illegalities of the certain IRS agents and so on. Until one day he got on the air. He said, "Well, it finally happened, folks. Our station was threatened. We are no longer allowed to open the show talking about anything to do with taxes or the IRS. However, if I declare it's an open forum, you, America, have the voice." And I'm telling you, Mike, America's voice is going to go on because It's not just a radio station. It's me, and it's many, many others out there like you, okay, that's going to keep this voice going. They can't stop us all. Also, I'd like to address one other thing real quick. This driver's license and this national ID thing, if people would look into the statutes a little bit more and realize the contractual nature of the driver's license also. I mean, you talk about consent to be governed. Well, their signature is their power of attorney. And when they turn that power of attorney over to a government entity or agency, okay, they're giving them power to regulate them in all areas. And it is contractual in nature because contracts fall under civil procedures, and Chapter 517 covers the driver's license chapter. 517, folks, look it up. Civil procedures apply to the driver's license. That's all I got to say, Mike.
All right. Hey, listen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
What Rich is saying there, folks, is that when you sign your driver's license and you sign the application, you're essentially giving the government a power of attorney over you to operate as your agent. And that means that you're giving them the ability to take this information and share it with a state database, with state law enforcement, with state regulation, regulatory agencies, and quite now, frankly, the Morpho Trust Organization, which is taking that information and disseminating it to third parties who you don't even know who they are. In fact, I'm not sure anybody really knows who they are. What I do know is Morpho Trust and Safran have morphed into the agency or the organization to target for the elimination of these types of. I mean, this group ought to be put out of business. I mean, realistically, they should be put out of business. Now, it'll never happen because their entire premise is a private and public partnership, and what that means to you is that they have the blessings of the federal and most of the state governments to do exactly this: capture all of your information and then disseminate it to third parties. And so, you're asking to put out of business the collector, the fishing net, if you will, of the fishermen. And I can tell you right now that is never going to happen. That's why I said it would be kind of funny if we saw a news blurb one day that Anonymous had actually shown that their security is worthless, because I'm willing to bet you that, look, there's no place that's hack-free. We found that to be the case because the Chinese just wade through our secured computer systems, both military and civilian and federal, like as if they're walking through a mall. So what makes us think that Morpho Trust and Safran have greater security capabilities than does, the Pentagon? Come on, I don't buy it. This is just a scam to guarantee that Americans get that little gold star, which is an RFID chip that is capable of telling everyone who needs or wants to know about you all the information that they can store on there. And let me tell you something. This is 1984 come to roost. It just had to wait until 2014. And I'm telling you that this is perhaps the most dangerous organization in the United States. It is an existential threat to the Republic of the United States of America. That is the truth. And I don't know why, according to that, and that other caller, the first caller was right. I don't know why I'm the only one who's out there saying what I'm saying. I mean, this isn't like something I'm coming up with out of a fiction magazine. This is real stuff that's available out there for anyone to do a little bit of research and homework to identify and find. Why is it that guys who have literally dozens of staffers and researchers can't go out there and find what little old me, who works all by myself from 4:30 in the morning until 8 o'clock in the morning, can dig up all of this data? How is that possible? I'm one guy. I'm not a trained researcher. I'm not a trained journalist. I'm not a trained anything. All I am is a guy who happens to take an interest in this and wants to disseminate and share this information with those of you out there so that somebody, somewhere, is telling the damn truth. And the mainstream media is sitting there blowing smoke on you like a bunch of honeybees trying to calm you down all the time. Why is that? Even faux news is complicit, apparently, because I don't know. I mean, how many researchers does Hannity have? How many researchers does Bill O'Reilly have? How many researchers does Laura Ingraham have? How many does Glenn Beck have? How many does Mark Levin have? I don't know. But I know I'm one lousy guy doing all of this on my own time, my own dime. Nobody pays me a red nickel. And I do this. I'm able to find it. Why can't they? Not only am I able to find it, I'm able to turn it around and present it to you in an articulated fashion that you as a layman understand. It's pathetic. And it's shameful. It's shameful that I, one little tiny flea on the elephant's butt, am able to provide and produce information that literally the mega titans of the industry with their 20 and 40 and 80 and $400 million contracts can't produce. Glenn Beck, I heard him say the other day that they have 300 employees. 300. Why, Glenn, are you not disseminating this? I mean, I'm asking you, flat out, why aren't you talking about this? This isn't tinfoil hat. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is real. And it's happening everywhere, every day. Why aren't you guys promulgating the concept of nullification? Why aren't you talking about the fact that we are being eaten alive by a government completely and absolutely out of control? I'm throwing the gauntlet down and asking you, if you won't do it, then damn it, fund me so I can. No, we wouldn't want to do that. We don't want to give you a bigger platform. We want to keep you right where you are in little Nowhereville. That's the real truth, people. I've had people say to me before, why aren't you on national radio? You're as good as any of those other guys out there. I'll tell you why. Because people don't want this kind of information out there. And we've got a group here gutsy enough to allow me to just do it. God bless them. And God damn the rest of them. Because apparently they don't care. All right, I'm going to that Firearms Freedom Symposium this afternoon. I'm praying that all of you are going to go. We're looking, this is at Remington's in Springfield. You just type it into your phone or type it into your computer and get directions. I'm not going to give them to you. Show up there sometime between about 4 o'clock or so. Speakers are going to be on at, I think, 5 or 6. And we're expecting literally 1,000 or 1,500 or maybe even 2,000 people to appear at this thing. So we want the press to be blown away by the volume of people that are going to be here. Larry Pratt is going to be there from the Gun Owners of America organization. You've heard him right here on our show. We're going to have Sheriff Richard Mack there. He's been on our show as well a number of times. And we're going to be trying to educate the folks in Missouri as to what gun control can do to a nation. So I'm encouraging you to please come there. We're going to be breaking some news with Larry Pratt from Gun Owners of America this afternoon relating to a local community resident here who's also a listener to our show on a piece of property which he's willing to provide out there for gun manufacturers who will move here, and he'll provide a 20-year lease free of charge to any gun manufacturer who will move here. Beretta, Kimber, where are you guys? Henry Rifles in Brooklyn, New York, where are you? Colt in Connecticut, come on down here. We want you. SCOCOG's backed this project. Southern Council of Governments. All right, Miller is next. We're going to wrap the show for the day, and 1 hour is just never enough, folks. I hope to see all of you tonight at Remington's. Please be sure to attend. You're listening to America's Voice now.
Let's get to the point.
Well, let me get to the point.
FM News Talk for the Ozarks is FM 107.1, The Point, KBMV.
Fox News Radio.